Well, first of all, I'd like to say good afternoon to everybody, and hopefully everybody had a nice break. And I'd like to thank John and NTT for the privilege of being up here today and inviting us to participate in your Upgrade 2024. So thank you again for allowing ServiceNow to be part of your event here. So this is a subject I'm very, very passionate about, cybersecurity, and how we use cybersecurity in more of a ubiquitous way to protect our personas, whether we're in the corporate world or we're home as a consumer. So as you can see from my title, Security by Default, applying the brakes to go faster. Believe it or not, sometimes in life you need to take a pause. And in order to go faster, sometimes you need better brakes. So we're going to go really fast, so no pun intended, so buckle up, because what you'll see today is I'm going to compare the auto industry and the highways that we travel on to cybersecurity and the applications we use. So a little extra credit if anybody knows who this is, but the auto industry was created 138 years ago, and the person credited with creating the first automobile was Carl Benz of Mercedes-Benz. So in 138 years, we've come a long way, but what enabled the cars to go faster? We always wanted to go faster in everything we do. We could always build better engines, faster, bigger pistons, better spark plugs, but it was really the brakes that allowed us to go faster, allowed us to create more security and maneuverability and control over our cars. And that was actually epitomized in a movie, Ford versus Ferrari. I don't know how many of you have seen it here, but it was really interesting because they really focused on the brakes in terms of being able to go into a curve faster and faster, knowing that you had very powerful brakes behind you to bring the car to a stop or to slow it down so you could maneuver around the brakes. But it wasn't just the brakes that allowed us to go faster. There's been many innovations in the 138 years since cars have been around. So 22 years ago, right, I apologize, 32 years ago, right, in 1920 was the first safety glass that was added to a vehicle. And it's interesting, it's been 32 years now since the internet's been commercially available, as of 1992. Many of us grew up with the internet, or many of you are not as old as I am, so the internet's been around since you've been around, but it's really only been around for 32 years. But there's been many safety features, seat belts, 6 airbags in every vehicle are now standard, rain sensing wipers, collision warning, lane departure warning, keyless entry, and I can go on, backup cameras. But the one thing they all have in common is these were once features where they were optional. They were security by design and not security by default. They were in the product, but you either had to enable them or you had to pay for them. Now, most of these features are either in the vehicle by default or they're federally mandated. So, oh, and the other thing is that this actually brought many automakers to actually work together, to collaborate. When they saw the power of collaboration and they saw the security, that security sold the different cars, right? The features of the cars, people gravitated towards security, right? One of the manufacturers, again, I'm not going to be a commercial for, but one of the manufacturers literally sold on the security of their vehicle, right? We should be doing the same thing. And the nice thing is, it required little to no training of these features. It actually, every time you turned your car on, it was on. So how do we take that same mindset, security by default versus security by design? And I'm not saying that we get rid of security by design. Security by design is very important, that our developers are constantly putting these security features into our product. But why aren't they turned on by default? So what can we learn when our users are traversing the information superhighway and using different applications? How do we embrace a security by default culture, right? This is actually taken directly from the CISA website. So they see it too, right? Security by design, security by default. What I mean by that, again, let's look at how we use applications every day. Things like multi-factor authentication, things like least privileged access controls, separation of duties. These are all things that we have to configure on the platform, right? They're there security by design, but but we require each user. Think of both your corporate persona and your consumer persona. When you use different applications, you have to go in there and you have to turn this on. Just like your car, why isn't it turned on when you start the application like you start your engine? Right? It should be, in my opinion, security by default. Unfortunately, we get a lot of education. And unfortunately, while we're educated and we learn how to drive a car and we learn how to use the different features within our vehicle, we don't get the same training when it comes to the different applications that we use. And anybody can use the information superhighway, right? And the features that we use, whether it be multi-factor authentication or separation of duties or access controls, they're all a little different on every application. But yet, as consumers, we just download that application on our computer or our iPhone or whatever phone you're using, and away we go. And it's confusing. I mean, hopefully, this is what we do. We kind of scratch our heads. Am I safe? Is my information private? Should I accept these cookies? What should I do here, right? Love Google. And Google does a wonderful job. I'm using them as an example, but they really do a wonderful job. If anybody's ever read through their terms of service agreement, they do a great job of explaining each of their security features, each of their privacy features, their safety features, and how to use them. How many of you, by show of hands, have taken the hours and hours you need to actually read through on how to use all these features, and then hours and hours to actually configure them, and then maintain them as Google adds new features and functionality? So I don't see any hands, and I'm guilty myself. I haven't done it either. Wouldn't it be nice, well, if these features were on by default? Because we all know what happens when we don't use them or set them appropriately. We have an incident. Nobody can afford to have an incident. We read in the paper every day about cyber incidents. And whether it's your mom or your dad, whether it's your sister or brother, whether it's a friend that you know, we all know somebody that has been compromised in their personal persona. And unfortunately, we know people in their professional persona that their companies have been compromised. Gartner pointed this out in 2017. We've been talking about this for a long time, but Gartner actually wrote it down in 2017. And they said inadequate configuration of cloud services by users will actually lead to more security incidents and data breaches. It's 7 years since that, and we're still operating the same way that we do today. Cybercrime Magazine, this is a staggering figure. $10.5 trillion. That's what they're anticipating, that cybercrime will affect the global economy. They're expecting a 125% increase year over year in cybercrime. This is staggering, but yet we go to work every day, we know the figures, the facts and figures, and yet we say, all right, I know I have to design my security, but it's not turned on by default. And unlike the internet, that the roadways warn us every day. Speed bump, school zone, dangerous curve ahead, fallen rock. By the way, there's over 500, I did some research, there's over 500 in the US, 500 approved federal traffic signs. How many do we have on the information superhighway? We also confuse our users. We started sending out links. Then we told people not to click on links, but we keep sending out millions upon millions of links to our users every day. Whether it's your phone bill, whether it's your banking statement, click this link. But how do we know that link is safe, right? Turns out, I love this little cartoon here, right? Enabling security to the users. People, unfortunately, we take security for granted. And as this cartoon points out, really, if you ask somebody, they're more worried about their game working or their application working, right? That's interruption to them than they are worried about data security. So I'm not sure we can change that mindset, but if we shift the onus to the application owner, the application provider, to turn these security features on by default, I think that would be a really good start. Because as this sign says, I think it's not practical nor scalable. We're going the wrong way. I'm not saying that what we're doing today isn't a good basis, but we really have to leapfrog ahead, is what I'm suggesting. And we need to blur the lines of shared responsibility, and I'll talk about that later. We all live by that shared responsibility doctrine. How do we blur that? How do we advance security in the applications so that, just like your seatbelt, it becomes something that's intrinsic to you, something that is something that you do every day without even thinking about it? Why do we want to do this? We want to increase the likelihood of success. Now, I'm not saying you can't turn it off, but like your car, it should be inconvenient. You should have to use energy to turn it off, and it should be a little inconvenient to turn off things like multi-factor authentication or access controls, right? And just like your car provides a warning light to you whenever you turn off one of these features. You ever take your seatbelt off while driving? What happens? You get an annoying ding, 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 ding. Or if you turn off your traction control, right? Or any other feature, it's there by default, but if you turn it off, you have a visible and consistent reminder that you are less than secure, less than foundational security that that application owner, in this case the car, wanted you to have. There is some good news. The good news is there are some things that are being done. Take Amazon S3 buckets, right? They've actually blocked access by public access by default now. That wasn't the case before. Take Apple. When iOS 14 came out, iOS 14 and above, they block access to your photo library. Now you get questioned, do you want to access your entire library? But they also gave you granular access to share photo by photo. So again, I call this my grade 8. I had to come up with a name, something that was kind of provocative. I'm not saying that we have to do all this, but I think this is a good start. MFA and SSO, right, single sign-on, I think has to be enabled by default on every application we use. Again, you can turn it off if you want, but let's get to a place where people are used to this, and just like putting your seatbelt on every day, that this becomes the first thing you do when you go on the internet. All users' accounts should be disabled and modified when your role changes. I'm going to skip down because I'm running out of time, but from an email banner message, how about every time you got an email, wouldn't it be great to know that, from a consumer's point of view, wouldn't it be great to know that this is the first time I've received an email from this person? How about if you included the domain registration date? This is a new domain, right? It's probably spam, right? Could be a phishing email. But these are things that I think need to be clued in, and we need to take a step further, right? Application support for biometric. Every application should have biometric authentication. We know we're moving away from passwords. Apple's done a great job. Your computers have done a great job in terms of authentication. How do we move away from it? Biometric should be turned on by default. This is where, again, I'll get a little controversial here. So should your email providers actually look at the content of your email? I apologize. Should they scan the email and scan the links in it and actually provide a confidence score and say, you know what, we've seen this email before. Alice, Bob, and Charlie actually reported this as phishing. We actually confirmed it. We're still going to send you the email, but we're going to put it in a quarantine folder, or we're going to give you a confidence score about it. Wouldn't that be nice? We do that at work every day. Our IT department, if they go in and somebody reports phishing, they will grab that email from everybody's email box like it never happened. But yet we put up with it as consumers, right? Or should we consider, should we consider creating a premium internet service where all of these things are turned on by default? I don't know about you, I pay for it. So a little self-serving in 2022, and that's why I was very glad they asked to do this presentation. So in 2022, many of you are familiar with the IT-ISAC or the FS-ISAC or the different ISACs. I actually created and co-founded the first ever Critical Software as a Service ISAC. It's actually a SIG, it's a special interest group, and what I did to speed up the process is I actually used the IT-ISAC's infrastructure. So we have 7 other companies, again, you can look them up, not an advertisement, but you can look them up, and what we do is we get together once every 2 weeks. We not only share vulnerability information and threat information, but we get together once every 2 weeks to try to raise the bar from a SaaS perspective from a for security, right? So again, I'm at the end of my time, but with Gen AI, and I promised I was only going to say Gen AI once in my presentation, and I kept to my word, but Gen AI is accelerating the pace of change. I think now is a great time to apply those brakes, pause a little, and understand how we use security in a default manner so that we can accelerate and we can adopt products and services like Gen AI more readily. So thank you very much.